Good stuff. Right, so Lifestyle Lab. So the Lifestyle Lab, this is going to be a workshop. We're going to do this once a month, sort of similar sort of time. So sort of one of the latter weeks at the end of the month, and we'll do it. There'll be a different topic each month. So I'll show you what those guys are going to be now, but just sort of go into sort of why I wanted to maybe give a approach to lifestyle. We obviously all come to the gym and we want to work hard, look good and feel good, but you know, there's a whole lifestyle approach that we need to consider when we're doing things. So to begin with, I'm going to give you a little bit of a story into sort of what got me into maybe the more lifestyle side of coaching the things. So when I was growing up, I had quite a colourful childhood, probably had to grow up a little bit quicker than most teenagers have to, been through some pretty interesting experiences. And it was, you know, it was quite difficult to deal with. So my school noticed a lot of behaviour change in me, and I began counselling for my aggression issues at about 13 years old, roughly. They tried to test me for ADD, which is attention deficit disorder, and OCD. So we all know what that one is. They never got more than my name down on the piece of paper because I was a stubborn little teenager. In the long run, that hasn't done me any favors. But as I got a little bit older, I started to notice my mental health deteriorate. I never actually spoke to anyone or dealt with anything regarding that. So I got to about 18 years old and I had a lot of, to be honest, voices and things like that in my head that took over. And I did attempt suicide at 18 years old, 2 weeks after my birthday, which is coming up to about a week from today, to be honest. I moved to uni 2 weeks later after that. And to be honest, being locked in a dorm, drinking all the things that you drink and doing all the things that you do in freshers probably wasn't the right timing for me, to be honest. So yeah, anxiety and depression for me was a massive thing that I had to deal with and overcome for the following 5 years. Now, I tried medication. I did various medications for anxiety, depressions, sleeping problems. None of it really sort of achieved what I thought it would achieve. Now, I do want to say that anybody that does take medication or wants or is going through anything, there's a vast amount of research that shows it works. I was just maybe one of the anomalies that it didn't quite make the cut for. So when the pandemic came, a lot of people mentally probably struggled a lot, but for me, it was actually an opportunity to explore some methods and some new ways on how to improve my lifestyle, improving the quality of it and the longevity of it. And I became quite passionate about learning about these things. And this is the things that I taught myself and the things that we're going to sort of discuss on a monthly basis, and how I use them and how you guys can then use those tools yourself just to improve your lifestyle, you know? So yeah, and then by the end of the pandemic, I was anxiety and depression free, back to work. You know, I've not had an episode of either of any of it since. So yeah, personally for me, it works. And what's worked for me is what I want to be able to share with other people. And that's kind of where my passion for this side of coaching came. So like I say, the pandemic gave me that opportunity to improve my overall well-being and mental health. October last year, I wanted to I'm a bit of a point prover. I wanted to prove a point to people that you can be where I've been in life and you can still go ahead and achieve things. So I climbed Penny Fan 5 consecutive times. It took me 10 hours. I did 56,000 steps and climbed half of Everest. I didn't stop for the whole thing. I literally kept moving throughout and I raised about $2,000. And that was a big turning point for me for wanting to be able to push this passion that I've newly found. So these are the 5 main, methods that I used and discovered during the pandemic. I tried and errored a lot of things. So as a person, I did a degree. I did a bachelor's of science degree. So evidence-based, things being evidence-based was very important to me. I understand with life coaching, you can often get a lot of the wishy-washy approach, and people kind of, that goes over people's heads, and to be honest, it would go over my head. So I need some sort of facts and figures a lot of the time for me to be able to believe into that method. So physical exercise will be what we discussed today. We'll do nutrition and sleep as the next workshop. Creating habits and routines will be following that. The Wim Hof method and breath work will follow on from there. And then cognitive behavioral therapy is the final piece that I use to better myself. So we'll go into why this workshop's going to help you guys, I suppose. So it's going to be, help improve your well-being, your mental health, but it's also going to have a look at how we can increase our longevity of life. So I've looked into a lot of research and how we can actually not add years on. So you can't be like, oh, I'm going to live till this age, but how can we prevent the reduction of our age? So we're going to improve the quality of our life, the longevity. We're going to feel a little bit younger and hopefully live a little bit longer, because that's the goal for everyone, I believe. So today, obviously, physical exercise and the impact it has on longevity. So we're going to look at different means to improve our present life, but also let's maybe look at exercise from a different point of view. So exercise right now, a lot of us are in Be Fit because we want to maybe tone up, lose a bit of weight, maybe get stronger. So these are all things that we can quantify. So we can put a number on our weight loss, we can put a number on the weights lifted, the aesthetic goal, okay, maybe not be quantifiable, but it's something that we look at ourselves. What I want us to do today is maybe take that approach, put it to the side, and then let's look at physical exercise from a different point of view. So when you're 80 years old, what do you want to be able to do in your 80s? Now, for most people, when they hit 80, it's quite a struggling time physically and mentally for a lot of people, but it doesn't have to be. We can use methods and think about the way that we're going to go forward with our physical exercise to actually make sure that the entirety of our life, not just up to retirement, is going to be beneficial and physically able to do things. So yeah, we're going to cover some of those methods today. So like I say, physical exercise is more than just increasing your strength, improving your cardiovascular function. So that's like your ability to run, swim, weight loss and aesthetic reasons. We want it to look at how it can improve our lifestyle as well. So we want to think about, how easy is it for us to go shopping and carry those heavy shopping bags home? Now, the older we get, the more difficult that becomes. Playing with kids and grandkids. I know my granddad, for example, as I started to get to about 8-10 years old, due to his age and his physical abilities, we didn't really have much of a physical relationship in terms of being able to play games, but I know for a fact that he'd like to be able to do that. So let's look at exercise and how we can benefit our lifestyle, not necessarily the numbers that we're looking for. So we can break this down into 3 things: the physiological, psychological and biomechanical adaptations through exercise. And we will go through what each of those mean and what they do. Okay, so we will start with physiological adaptations. So physiological adaptations is what occurs inside the body. So in terms of chemicals, force production, everything that's going on inside. So quite a damning statistic is that the body will naturally lose 2 to 4% of strength per year without consistent training. So if we look at the next point, if you stop training at 50, by the time you would retire, which is sort of your late 60s, you'd lose nearly half of your overall strength at a time which, really you want to be able to maintain as much as possible during that time. Some studies do say it's about 1.3% per year, but the average is between 2 and 4%, and definitely closer to 4% as we pass 50. So if we're not going to be training regularly in the gym and doing strength training, that's going to have a massive impact on our lives. So the average 1-year-old, I'm sure we all know, they're not the lightest things in the world, babies, but they weigh about 8 to 10 kilos, the average 1-year-old. Now, if we think about that in terms of strength and percentages, you're not going to be able to play with that child in 2 years' time physically, because you'll have decreased such a mass amount. If you've got 10, let's say 10 kilos is 100% and you're losing 4% a year, and that kid's getting heavier, you're not going to be able to carry it on your shoulder, things like that. So these aren't things that maybe we don't consider when we're coming and creating our goals within the gym, maybe when you did your kickstart. So we're going to basically change the way that we look at things. We want to be very able when we retire. We want to be able to ensure that we can still do all the things that all of you do now today. And the biggest underutilized tool in terms of strength training is grip strength. So probably thinking, why is grip strength important? So the second biggest unintentional killer in the world is trips and falls. Now, that might not be instant death from the trip or the fall, but if you imagine if you fell over, you don't have the grip strength to prevent that fall. That's going to have a massive impact on how hard you hit that ground. And if you hit the ground and you need to pull yourself up to get to the phone to ring an ambulance for any reason, you're not going to be able to do that unless we're working on our grip strength. So grip strength actually has the highest correlation to longevity of life. So people with better grip strength in their elderly years tend to live longer for those reasons. So yeah, grip strength is something that's going to be massive as we get older, and it's very easy to train. You just got to hold something heavy for a sustained period of time. So we can achieve these results quite easily, but we definitely don't always look at the full picture and how something as simple as grip strength can determine whether you get an ambulance to your house after you've fallen or maybe had a stroke or a heart attack. So there's lots of reasons why grip strength is going to be very beneficial towards us. So then we've looked at strength. We're now going to look at cardiovascular training and why we need it. So cardiovascular training is basically just emulating what our heart does throughout the day. So there's 5 heart rate zones. We spend the majority of them in 1, because that is your resting heart rate. So when you're asleep, if you're relaxed like a lot of us are now and chilled out, you're generally going to be in and around heart rate zone 1. Zone 2 is when you're doing sustained amount of time doing a low level, low intensity activity. So could be taking the dog for a walk, just like going shopping through town. You think how much walking, escalators, stairs, things like that. So you're on the move for a sustained period of time. That's at a very low intensity. And then number 5, zone 5, is the one where our heart rate reaches the maximum heart rate. We can't go any higher, and we all do have a peak heart rate. So there isn't just like an unlimited amount of heartbeats per minute that you can reach, and we will discuss that in a second. So in terms of cardiovascular training, I'm not going to say go and have a nap to train zone 1. That's not what I'm going to recommend. But zone 2 and zone 5 do have massive impacts on our longevity of life. We'll go into those now. So if we train in zone 2 and 5, so we're doing something for a long period at low intensity, or maybe we're doing, for example, like a short run, long walk. Zone 5, that could be, a lot of people have done Harry's Be Strong program right now, and I'm sure after you finished your 1RM, you probably felt like your heart was going to come through your chest, because your body is exerting so much force that you need to provide it with nutrients to the right areas, and the only way it's going to do that is by pumping blood through a very fast heartbeat. So by doing these various training methods, we can actually reduce our resting heart rate. This will allow us, the lower our heart resting heart rate, the stronger our heart is. It can make a stronger contraction to send more oxygenated blood to the right areas of the body, and then bring back blood, which is full of carbon dioxide. And carbon dioxide will eventually turn into lactic acid, and that's what makes us sore on the next day after training or within training. So reducing our heart rate is going to be key to improving our longevity of life. Reducing our blood pressure. Now, anybody here suffer with high blood pressure? I'm sure you'd be able to say more about it than me, but in terms of high blood pressure, your body's now working at a rate that it doesn't need to. So you're pumping nutrients, you're retrieving nutrients and sending things all around the body at a rate actually the rest of your cardiovascular function cannot keep up with. So the blood's moving too fast for your heart to retrieve it, and that can end up with clots. Increased lung capacity. Now, we all know what it's like when we see a big set of stairs. Nobody really wants to walk up it. We all see an escalator and a set of stairs. 9 times out of 10, most people choose the escalator because maybe they're not doing enough cardio training and they know that by the time they get to those stairs, they're going to be out of breath. Now, by doing training in zone 2 and 5, we can actually increase the lung capacity. So we discuss it in milliliters. So the average person probably consumes around about 4,500 milliliters in the biggest breath that they can take. So if your body needed 4,000 milliliters of oxygen, and you can only intake 3,000 milliliters, somewhere in the body is going to be deficient. And that is then going to cause us either an injury, a fatigue, or anything along those lines. And then we've got mitochondrial production. So the mitochondrial production, so mitochondria is the power source of all cells. So within a cell, you have various properties, but the one that creates energy is the mitochondria, and it's the biggest part of the cell. So for us to be able to actually exert force, use our energy levels, we need to make sure that we're improving and increasing the production of mitochondria. And then finally, reduce the risk of chronic diseases. So there's 4 main areas that cardiovascular training does benefit. So we've got metabolic dysregulation. So that is, you think, your stomach, your digestive system, and things like that. The cardiovascular diseases, so that is, that could be heart attacks, strokes, anything respiratory. Cancers, we all know what they are. They can be found anywhere in the body. And then neurodegeneration. So that could be things like Parkinson's disease, the other one, motor neurons disease, and other things like that that affect the sort of cognitive function of the brain. So by doing cardiovascular training, we can actually reduce the risk of all of those things. And it doesn't take more than an hour a week. You can do 45 minutes of zone 2, go for a walk, and then run up and down a hill for 15 minutes. And the science behind that and the results that people have found during science to reduce the risk of these injuries and diseases is going to improve the longevity of life, because we're actually reducing the risk of becoming very, very ill as we get later on in life. So you're probably wondering, how do we work out our heart rate zones? Well, most people have a watch on their arm. They're about as accurate as a chocolate fire guard. In terms of actually being able to figure out what your true heart rate zones are, 220 minus your age is an estimate of your max heart rate. So if you've got a heart rate monitor, you can use that to your advantage. Now, majority of us don't walk around with a heart rate monitor on, and the ones in the hospitals are probably the only ones that are actually worthwhile using. So we can actually, instead of quantifying that, we can turn it into qualitative. So qualitative is basically achieving results without numbers or facts and figures. So if we have a look at this one here, we can actually look. So you've got at the very top, that'd be zone 5. So you're pushing yourself to the limits. You can only sustain this activity for a short duration of time because of excessive metabolic byproduct buildup in your muscles. So Steve, you did your 1RMs the other day. I'm sure you probably felt the buildup in your legs afterwards. It's an absolute killer, but you did 1 rep. So that's what I mean. Zone 5 doesn't take a lot, but the fatigue levels are very quickly. Now, if we look further down, you can see as we come down, you're able to speak more words. You make you sing a song while still doing the exercise. So everybody can walk and everybody can talk. That, if you can talk and have a conversation with someone while exercising, you're generally going to be in and around zone 2, and then completely relaxed and completely normal. That's going to be your final zone 0, zone 1, whichever one you want to prefer. So yeah, if you've got a heart rate monitor, you've got a great way to have a look at what your max heart rate is. But if you don't, you can use methods like this. The amount of words that you can speak it during the exercise will indicate an approximate heart rate zone. So carrying on, so this is probably what I think is most important, is the physiological adaptation due to exercise. So autonomic nervous system, and how does this impact us? So this is a completely involuntary system. It controls our internal environment. So it's trying to achieve homeostasis. So that homeostasis is just complete regulation of the body. So maintaining your heart rate, so you're not having irregular heartbeats, maintaining your breath. So if we think about how important that is during physical exercise, we all know how difficult it is to learn a new technique or learn a new exercise, and how much brain power it takes to make sure we're doing the thing correctly. So imagine having all that technique to remind yourself of, but at the same time, you've got to regulate your heart rate, you've got to regulate your breath, you've got to make sure that oxygenated blood is going to the muscles that it's working, and you've also got to bring CO2 back out of that. So you've got to do all of these things. Imagine trying to do that voluntarily. It would be an absolute nightmare. You'd never get anything done. So this is why that this autonomic nervous system is vital to every single thing that we do day to day and in the gym. So let's have a little look into what the depths of it. So we can split it into 3 branches. We've got the parasympathetic nervous system, the sympathetic nervous system, and the enteric nervous system. So these are the 3 systems that branch. You've got the autonomic nervous system, and then they branch into 3 branches down here, and they all play a different role within that system. So we'll look into those now. So the 2 that we're mainly concerned with is the sympathetic nervous system and the parasympathetic nervous system. We all know what fight or flight is. That is when our body has to deal with stress or shock. So our autonomic nervous system will handle all of the things that you need internally for you. So if you're, I don't know, let's say you're in a situation where you need to escape, then you need to make sure your body is going to be instantly ready to run. Or if you're ready to fight, then you need to make sure that the body's ready to go for that. So that it will increase your heart rate when necessary. It'll constrict your blood vessels to make sure that you're getting blood to the muscles that you need very, very quickly. You could also, if you're getting very hot, your body from the inside, your body will sweat. So that's what a lot of people don't realize. Sweat, all that happens when you sweat, it's just the internal side of your body. It just needs to cool down, and it will release that through water and through the skin. Now, the parasympathetic nervous system basically does the opposite to what I've just explained. So instead of increasing everything, it will bring things down. The only other slight difference that it has is the vagal nerve. That's quite important to maintaining a regular heart rate. So that doo-doo, doo-doo. Now, if we didn't have a vagal nerve, our heartbeat might go like doo-doo, doo-doo. And that's going to be an irregular pattern resulting in blood clots and bad blood pressure and things like that. So this system is so important. And how does that transfer into daily life? So every time we exercise, we are putting our body under stress. We are in shock. And it's just because essentially you're getting a muscle fiber, and when you do an exercise, you are pulling those muscle fibers apart. And then through nutrition, we repair them together. But our body is essentially going into fight or flight mode every time we do a warm up. So through that, we are actually training our autonomic nervous system. We're teaching our body how to regulate itself internally much, much better. So if you're ever in a stressful situation, you might have a boss who's giving you this. You might, I don't know, a bit of road rage, anything like that. Your body needs to calm itself down or speed itself up. Through doing that on a regular basis, your body's going to get to the point of homeostasis, so that regularity internally, much, much quicker. So we're going to be able to deal with those stressful situations much, much more efficiently and effectively. As whereas someone who didn't train and then they've got to put themselves in a stressful environment, the likelihood is they're not going to reach homeostasis as quick as someone who does exercise. So internally, that body is not prepared to deal with that situation. Mentally, whole different conversation, but physically, to be able to deal with those situations internally better, it's going to have a vast improvement. So we're going to now look into maybe more the psychological adaptations that occur in exercise. So this is what goes on inside of here when we train, when we do any form of exercise. So one of the main things that happens is we get a chemical released from the brain called dopamine. So dopamine is basically the chemical messenger between the brain and the body. Okay, so just think of it as like a telephone line from the brain to every single part of the body. With that, so we can actually train how much dopamine we're actually got in our body. So through regular exercise, we will remodel the reward system, and this will result in higher circulating levels of dopamine and more available dopamine receptors. So this is actually just going to allow us to make sure that we're getting the signals to the right places and the right signals are going back. So without this, we wouldn't have an absolute clue on how to motivate ourselves. We wouldn't be able to move this efficiently. We wouldn't be able to go into a lot of things I'm going to cover now. So basically, dopamine is controversial in the sense of people suggest it's part of the physiological system, others believe it's psychological. There's points for both. So physiological, is a vasoconstrictor. So that basically is going to increase your blood pressure when exercising. So when you're exercising, you need more blood to the working muscles. If you didn't have that, then you wouldn't be getting the energy and the supplementation. So carbohydrates, proteins, sugars, things like that need to get to the muscles to make them work and provide them with energy. We're actually going to speed up that process through dopamine receptors. Increase removal of sodium. So sodium is salt. It's just a good way to dehydrate your body. We've all been in the gym now for the last 6 weeks. Some of us have been in during the heat wave. Now imagine if your body was unable to remove salt from your body, and think how dehydrated you were just in the heat. Now without being able to removal of salt, you're going to be even more dehydrated, and the likelihood is you're going to crash or fatigue very, very quickly. Insulin production. So this comes back to the sugars. This is being able to provide energy to the right areas. So by reducing insulin, we're going to increase our sugar. And then lymphocyte activity. Now lymphocytes are quite complicated. You can talk all day about them, but essentially it is a key part of your immune system. So when we finish exercising, we will reduce the amount of lymphocytes in the body, and what the body will do, it will basically go, oh no, there's no lymphocytes. I need to boost my immune system to make sure that I get those back. So it's basically you're tricking the body into improving your own immune system. And we all know with the pandemic just gone how important a good immune system is to just general health and longevity. Think how many, and a poor immune system was a key factor. It's why we had such a high death rate within COVID. So you just think like if we could have got half of those people exercising just a little bit more, what the different numbers would have been. And then so when we look at it from a psychological point of view, it's going to improve our moods. So we're going to improve our moods drastically by training. It's going to increase levels of motivation. So your body's going to go, oh, you've done that once, we can do that again. We'll keep on doing that. I enjoy that. So let's keep going. Increase energy levels. Again, that kind of crosses over to the insulin. And then cognitive function. Now that's what we're going to discuss in a bit more depth next, and how important cognitive function is. So as we get a little bit older, there's nothing we can do about this, but our cognitive function will decrease naturally, no matter how much you train, no matter what you do. But what we can do through exercise is slow down the rate at which our cognitive function decreases. So we can do that through brief bouts of moderate to intense exercise. So that would be sort of zone 2 or zone 5 training. You don't have to do it for more. The research shows that literally 20 minutes once a day of moderate to intense exercise, the impact it has on the cognitive function is profound. So cognitive function, if we break that down, it's memory and learning. So your ability to retain information and adapt on it and make it into something new. Language, so that would be the way that we communicate with people. So that we've got social media as a means for that now, but this is more in person. Executive function, so our ability to make high pressure decisions in quick time. So if you were at work and you were like, we need this now, but we've got 2 options, what do we go for? An improved cognitive function is going to be able to make that decision much more effectively and responsibly. Complex attention, probably something I need to improve, but in terms of that is your attention span, how long you can spend on one task at a time. Social cognition. Now, for me, I go to the pub, enjoy a drink with my friends, go have a chat, things like that. Nothing worse annoys me more than looking to sit on the phone when you go to a social environment. Now, that actually might not be that person's fault. That could just be down to that their cognitive function just isn't on the same level as yours. So they struggle to interact socially at the same level. So a lot of the times when people are going inside themselves, it's not just because they don't want to speak to you, it's just scientifically, they just might not be on the same level. And then perceptual and motor functions, so that is just like hand-eye coordination, things like that. And again, that's going to be massive. So go back to the trips and falls. If you trip and fall, your hand-eye coordination to reach something to grab onto quickly in that moment could be the difference between you hitting deck or not. So motor functions massively important, and we all know how important it is coordination in the gym. I'm asking someone to hinge. I'm asking them then to do some rows at the same time, maintain that body position. Let's think of all the different exercises that you have to do. Hugh's laughing at me because he's thinking about box fit. But yeah, so you think like it's true though, isn't it? You know, your hand-eye coordination to throw a jab, then a hook, then an uppercut continuously without having to think about it. That all comes under that cognitive function umbrella. So that's why we continue on with training, because it's only going to get worse as we get older. So let's find a way of reducing the rate that it gets worse. Okay, last little slide on psychological adaptations. So endorphins, what are they? We've all probably had a really good gym session, left the gym session absolutely buzzing. I have no idea why we're buzzing, because me or Harry or Tom have absolutely ruined your life for the last 45 minutes, made you work and sweat. But then you leave and you feel like, oh, I feel amazing. I feel so glad I did that. Well, basically, endorphins are released from the body every time you go through painful or stressful situations. Now, for a lot of us now who've been going to the gym regularly, we actually enjoy coming in here. That's because every time you step foot in this place, your brain knows you're about to go through some form of pain or stress internally. So let's release some endorphins to make you enjoy the experience. So basically, that's the post-workout buzz. That's what it is. It's an endorphin release. It's just a chemical that's released in the brain. And every time you're in a similar environment, it will release that. So again, how do we transfer that across to our daily life? Well, if you're ever in a stressful or painful situation, your body knows that you're in that situation. So it's going to release endorphins. You might have seen Jackass. The pranksters, they do really, really stupid things. They hurt themselves all the time deliberately, but they're always laughing and joking while they're doing it. But that's because their body internally knows that this painful or stressful situation is going to require a massive endorphin release to ensure that they're actually going to enjoy that experience that they probably wouldn't if they didn't have endorphins. So yeah, you could probably say they're all off their head a little bit, but at the same time, their endorphin release through going through those activities is absolutely huge for them to be able to carry on doing what they're doing. Now, we all don't need to jump off buildings, walk on fire and do things like that, but we all do go through stressful situations on a regular basis, regardless of what they may be. So to have that little dump of endorphins released into the body is just going to make you handle that situation much more respectively, calmer, and in a much better fashion. Okay, so finally, we're going to get to biomechanical adaptations. Now, this is probably the most boring of the three out of physiological, well, in my opinion, physiological, psychological, and biomechanical. It's lots of facts, lots of figures, and lots of numbers, so we're not going to dive into it too much. We're just going to get an understanding of what biomechanics are. So biomechanics is basically how the body works from a physics standpoint. So forces, angles, math, all sort of kind of combined into one. So we could spend a whole day, year, month talking about that. I did 3 years of it in uni. Never again. So break it into 4 different things. Increase force production. So that is our ability to contract a muscle. So if you want to lift more weight, your muscle needs to contract at a higher force. So we need to continually train that. Improve mobility. Tom's mobility classes are great. I'm sure everyone on here has probably done it at least once, and doing mobility training have probably understood the benefits of it. So a lot of us can do a squat and squat nice and deep and get nice and deep or to at least parallel. Now, if you put your body weight on a bar on your back, are you going to hit that same depth? For a lot of people with low mobility, they're not going to be able to hit that depth with the weight on their back, but we take the weight off and they're okay. So it's our ability to move under load. And how are we going to be able to apply that to daily life? Well, you got to carry a delivery, you've got to pick something up in an awkward position. Mobility, to the ability to move under load, that's going to be what the difference is. So you could be the strongest man in the world, but if you can't bend down and pick that up at the same time, you know, what are you left with really? And then balance. So this comes back under that category of the trips and falls. Now, balance, I get a lot of people doing a lot of marches and a lot of single leg work and things like that in the warm-ups. It's just to improve your balance. Obviously grip strength is hopefully going to prevent us from, if we're already beginning the fall, grip strength is going to either prevent us from landing or it's going to help us get back up. Now, balance is what's most important to making sure that that fall doesn't happen in the first place. So making sure that we have good balance is going to actually improve our longevity of life so we don't become a statistic of the second biggest unintentional killer in the world. And then finally, stability. So that's your ligaments and tendon strengths. So tendon is muscle to bone. That's what connects your muscles to your bones. Without those, you wouldn't be able to do that because there's nothing attaching that bone to this bicep. So the bicep causes flexion in the arm. If we didn't have that tendon, you do nothing. Ligaments, they keep bone to bone. So without ligaments, it would all be floppy and all out of place. It'd be a nightmare. So finally, this is the last slide, guys. I've actually timed this pretty well, so I'm pretty happy with that. I get a lot of my information from a guy called Peter Attia. He's a British bloke. He has been studying longevity for a long time, probably the last 2 or 3 decades. He has a podcast called Drive. You can find it on Spotify, and it's quite interesting. He has lots of guests on there. I think it's had like Hugh Jackman, other people, and how they basically going through their methods of how they've improved their longevity of life. And then Andrew Huberman, the podcast, the Huberman Lab, that is, again, a very similar thing. So maybe not completely focused on longevity, but it focuses on the science behind what the body needs, what in terms of, so it basically covers all the things I'm going to be covering. So nutrition, sleep, exercise, medication, supplements. Both of those guys cover pretty much everything that you want to know. I would say Peter Attia is less facts and figures and more conversation. Andrew Huberman, if you do have a good understanding of science, then I would go to him. But both got social media accounts, both on Spotify, YouTube, all of those things. That is where I get a lot of my information from. And then finally, any questions, guys? Anyone? I honestly, if you want to ask me about my journey with mental health, any questions on the science, methods, anything, I'm an open book. Don't hold back. If anybody has any questions, just unmute yourself and fire away. The old silence. That's like going back to school when a teacher asks you a question, everyone goes, nope. But yeah, anyone has a question, just let me know. Or if you want to ask me a question in person, you know where I am. I'm always here. I'm always open for a conversation. But yeah, you guys can obviously unmute yourselves now. And yeah, thank you all very much for joining. It's been a pleasure. We'll do nutrition and sleep in the next month, which will be quite interesting. Because I'm sure a lot of people probably don't realize how important those two things are. I'm sure we all sleep and I'm sure we all eat, but what do we need those things for? So yeah, thank you all for joining, guys. Have a lovely evening. If I don't see you tomorrow, have a great bank holiday and take care. And I'll see you all next week, if not tomorrow.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Owen.
No worries. Cheers, guys.
Bye.
Bye-bye. Cheers.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Everyone.
Thank you all.
I don't know.
Yeah, how was that? Was it okay?
Really good. Yeah, well done. Yeah.
I timed it bang on. That was my worry. I've practiced it twice and it was a bit short, but I've managed to long it out a bit.
Yeah, no, that's fine. No, really good. You came across really well. So yeah, brilliant. Good stuff.
No problems, no problems. Right.
Excellent. I think Anne left a message then.
Yeah, I'm just going to respond to her now.
Yeah. She's probably gone actually.
Yeah, man. I've done it now, haven't I? Okay, right. I'm going to stop the recording.